Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to episode 188 of Sticks in the Six podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Forbes, here with my co-host, Peter Barricchini. And Peter, we're going to be joined shortly by the boss man over at the Hockey Podcast Network, Kyle Manifold. Outside of that, as you can see, we're brought to you by DraftKings, SeatGeek, No Name Hockey, BioSteel, and of course, the fine folks at the Indie Ale House. Before we get into all that fun stuff, all the hockey talk from the week that has been, Peter, how you doing this week, buddy?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I know that we're going to be getting into, some trade talk and everything like that. Four Nations is just around the corner, so yeah, it's been pretty hectic in terms of keeping up with the news cycle, because it seems like every single day something's coming out, something's piquing your interest in regards to movement, what's going to happen with some of the rosters now for the Four Nations, because some bigger names could be on the way out. We don't know, but that's what's to be expected when you play games this close to a big tournament. So, yeah, I mean, my week itself, it was kind of low-key, kind of quiet. Just, again, tough keeping up with the news cycle. But other than that, Maple Leafs are on a 2-0 stretch right now after losing 3 straight. This is kind of the hockey that they need to win. Every single game basically needs to be in a win-now mode. And given how tight the Eastern Conference race is, you can't afford to lose games, so they need to stay on top of things right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Over here in the Forbes household, it's been a crazy week. The kids were both sick, and now my wife and I are slowly recovering. So bear with me here as I sort of get through the sniffles and all that build up in the sinuses. It's just it's an absolute mess.
Get that vitamin C, get that ginger ale going, man.
I've been popping everything. I got some green tea with lemon here. Like,
it's just beautiful.
This is the old man coming through now.
Those are the remedies that you need, though.
That's right. It's starting to hit the body a little different. Anyways, I want to quickly show you a couple things. I'm an impulsive collector, as you can see in the background here, a little bit of everything. Anyways, over top of my head here, right there, you'll see an old picture.
I see that, yeah.
Okay, I have it in the basement in the studio on loan from. Okay, first I'll let you know it's the Maple Leafs team picture from 1931-32. So it's a 92-year-old photo. Okay, 92-year-old photo. It's in rough shape. It's a 92-year-old photo. I have it on loan for as long as I know this person, from the great nephew of Hap Day.
Wow.
So he brought that in, and he let me have it on loan. So it's like I said, I tried to get it in the shot. It's up top, right over top of my head there. 1931-32 team photo of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So on loan in the studio for the time being. On top of that, I got to show you this because Easton Cowan got a lot of heck after the World Juniors there. We got Easton Cowan signed jersey to add to the cave as well. So
there you go.
So
buying for the future.
Hopefully he's not moved anytime soon, as I did write that he was an untouchable, but you never know. There's no such thing as an untouchable anymore. But anyways, we're gonna welcome Kyle to the show here. He's sitting in studio. He's getting ready here to head out on vacation. Kyle? Welcome.
Well overdue.
That's right.
You kind of look like you need one, though.
Oh my God. Well, so I didn't really have a Christmas, so this is my kind of little getaway. So I'm at my parents. Had to travel down from good old Sudbury on Sunday.
Home of Shoresy.
Yeah, and then flying out to Calgary. What's that? Tomorrow morning. Got to get to Kitchener for 3 a.m. and we're gonna go ski for a week. So me and my dad.
Beautiful.
Nice.
So,
there you go.
Yeah, and
beautiful place to do it.
Lots of beer to go along with it.
That's right. That's right.
It's never a vacation when you don't have beer, right?
Oh, of course, never.
You gotta have
never.
Yeah, I was just telling Peter that photo in the back there. I was loaned it from Hap Day's great nephew.
Oh, no way.
So he brought in 92-year-old team photo. So I threw it up in the cave, tried to get in the image here, but anyways, we'll get right into the hockey talk here.
Do it.
Before we get going here, a quick mea culpa from last week. Peter, we talked about what was going on in Brantford with that young kid Tavin. It was I said the U13 team. It was actually the U15 team. And good news is Tavin's now been picked up by a team in Oxford County. So he's going to get a chance to play for them. It is a lower level, but it has made news waves all around Ontario in the recent days anyways.
And it has reached Rick Westhead too. So he was already
Oh,
on top of that very, very quickly.
Yeah. So that's wonderful news. Around the league right now, a couple big trades this week. Obviously the JT Miller trade. I think we all kind of saw this coming, especially with the turmoil. Apparently, like, Elliot Friedman won't touch on what he's kind of got two stories and two
Multiple
sides
stories,
of the stories.
different sides.
He won't touch on it much, but I was hearing the Dolly show was talking about that it was a physical altercation that he had with a coach, and some of the teammates didn't like it. And anyways, it kind of they gave him the time off. He took his 10-day leave, and then he came back, and there was still some turmoil in the room. So interesting move there, but obviously JT Miller going back to the New York Rangers and being with his childhood friend Vincent Trocheck, big move for him. He had a big game in his first or in his return to the Rangers. Any quick thoughts on that from you boys?
I was just going to say, it was either coming down to Pettersson or Miller. And I think the fact that Miller waived his no trade clause obviously had to have been New York. And then lo and behold, that was the main target or main team involved. It was coming down to one of those two players. And considering that there was kind of like an issue, again, there's a lot of speculation going on as to why he took that 10-game absence, but it was after that Nashville game. And then he immediately went after that. That kind of seems to me like you might as well try to move that problem right away as quick as possible. And they managed to do that. So again, we don't know exactly what happened, but if Miller was involved, I mean, that's one thing that you just really got to move on from, because you kind of don't need that in the locker room. And if it's going to linger over, if it's going to have that issue and it's going to affect everyone else, you might as well just, rip the Band-Aid off and try to do something. And you weren't going to get a good return out of it. I know Hedo's a pretty good return. Victor Mancini, I love as that prospect coming back, but you weren't going to get top value for that. So, I mean, he had a big game for the Rangers, but now if there's anything that happens in the future, it's now probably going to be New York's problem now.
Go ahead, Andrew.
No, go ahead, Kyle.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's two things. Like, it's Pettersson now, like, it's all on him, right? Like, now it's kind of like, okay, we think we've got this so-called cancer out the door. And then, Andrew, you brought up Miller with the physical altercation, right? Like, the whole story of it, we're not going to find out 20 years from now. He's going to jump on an interview, right? It's going to be a chill talk, and he's going to spill the beans of everything that happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's interesting now because it's going to be on Pettersson, $11 million guy. He's now expected to he's going to be the guy, right? And there's been the crazy part about it is that Vancouver did so well last season. Everyone was on the train that the Canucks were ready to compete again, and obviously the Demko injury and then this, and then there's conversations of like maybe Brock Besser's out the door as well, and all of a sudden you're talking Quinn Hughes doesn't want to go through a rebuild. There's all these headlines that are kind of following the Canucks now, and it's
the end.
It's crazy how quickly it can change, though, right? Like you go from this team that's competing to, where they are now. It's insane. But Peter, you mentioned it. It's New York's problem now, and we'll see how the Canucks come through it. I think Rick Tocchet's the guy to get it done, to kind of turn things back around. But in other news, obviously Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci, legendary Leaf defenseman Cody Ceci, were traded to the Dallas Stars by the San Jose Sharks. San Jose got, surprisingly, a first-round pick and a conditional third-round pick in the 2025 draft. I think it's a great ad by Dallas to pick up a little bit of depth down the middle with Granlund. Ceci, we joke a lot about his performance in Toronto, but, reliable bottom pairing guy that can add a little bit of depth to the back end for Dallas to go on a big run. And as we know, come playoff time, you can never have enough defensemen. So good news for Dallas out of there. Outside of that, just quickly, the IIHF also noted that Russia and Belarus still cannot compete I believe in next year's Winter Games again. So big note out of there, especially with a guy like Ovechkin kind of on the tail end of his career. Probably not going to get another shot at the Olympics. And then finally, before we get over to the Leafs and their West Coast swing here, the anthem talk is everything. And obviously, we're not a political podcast, so we're not going to dive into the politics of this. But I just wanted to bring this up quickly because there was two very, very significant answers to the question of, all the booing to the American national anthem. Obviously, the Canadian national anthem was booed the other night as well. But the conversation now is going towards the players. And I think people were a little bit upset with Matthews for not commenting. At the same time, I think Matthews did the right thing and not commenting, not making it a political point. On top of that, you had Jonathan Marchessault, who kind of went the other way, did comment on it, but I think responded in the appropriate way in saying that the anthems are there to support the veterans, and for the booing to happen, obviously it's become a conversation piece in sports again, whether the anthem is appropriate at the beginning of games. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. I just wanted to note the two kind of polar aspects of how to answer that question for these guys, because obviously it's going to be something that's going to come up again in another 30 days when this political swing continues to take its toll on this relationship we have north and south of the border.
Yeah, I'm just going to touch briefly on it too. I think we all know why the booing happened, and this isn't the first and it won't be the last time that the national anthems are being brought into the spotlight when it comes to political views and everything like that, as we've seen in the past in, like other sporting events and everything like that, the NFL with the kneeling and all that. It brings light to, very serious issues. And this is probably one that's going to affect both countries. So I can understand why people want to get the players' take on this. But if they choose not to answer, I mean, it's their choice. But I think we all have a good reason, or we know why the booing is happening based on what's happened the last few days, and that's just it.
Yeah. And if you want answers, you're not going to get it from the players, and it sucks that they get put in the spotlight.
I was about to say, they're not the ones involved in this whole thing right now that's going on between, this whole trade war or whatever. So it doesn't seem fair to ask them when they're just hockey players kind of thing. So, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's dive into the Leafs West Coast swing. It happens once a year. Kyle, we got the Calgary fan here.
Right.
It was an interesting start to the game last night. The Leafs won 6-3. Obviously, William Nylander, first time he's ever scored at the Saddle Dome. He decides to do it 3 times. His second career hat trick, 8 years to the day of his first career hat trick. Crazy.
That's a crazy stat.
But it was two goals called off. What were your thoughts right off the top there, Kyle?
Yeah, just pretty unorthodox though, right? I mean, I think the biggest one of the night was the one that Ryan Huska didn't challenge, was right at the end, right?
Yeah.
Where you saw the goalie interferences called early on, and you get that, and it just seemed like that was more goalie interference than compared to the other ones, right? So I was just curious why. It probably wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game, but that one kind of just surprised me more, where I'm like, well, that kind of seems a little bit more blatant obvious.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a conversation that Peter and I have had many times in what is goaltender interference. It's the age-old question now in the NHL. What is goaltender interference? Obviously, the Tavares goal, they decided to call it high sticking. It was such a borderline call. You couldn't really tell from any angle they had. Obviously, they've got better angles than we do. But then the second goal that was called off. It was the Joel Farabee one. It was interesting because there was a small tap on the blocker from Jonathan Huberdeau, but really, I mean, I think goaltenders have become the softest positional player in all of sports outside of those who play soccer. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean,
it's getting up there.
It is getting up there, right? I think the best way to look at it, and everybody's viewpoint is going to be different, especially when it comes to the refs making these decisions. But to me, it's is it going to hinder their ability to make the save? I would have probably challenged the last one at the end there with Huska.
Mhm.
And I feel like the one early on, the one that you mentioned, like that could have gone either way, to be honest. So it's just it depends how they look at it in terms of did it really hinder his ability to make the save or not. That's just the way they look at it.
Yeah, it was interesting too. Sorry, Peter.
No,
The
that's fine.
Tavares one, I actually thought they were originally challenging for goaltender interference because he hit the glove of the goaltender at the time.
Right.
That was my thought. I thought you had a better chance with goaltender interference than you did with the high stick. But yeah, it was just interesting the way that game started with two goals called back.
Yeah, and it's kind of very funny too because in that Calgary Seattle game, there were a couple goals called off in terms of challenges as well. So it's like
they were pissed.
it's like it kind of carried over into this one, which is very ironic about that because they were talking about how the challenge was going on and on the first one. I'm like, man, if you're the Calgary Flames, like how can you be happy about what's gone on or what's transpired the last two games? But I agree with you, Andrew. I thought the first non-goal on Tavares probably should have been interference because the contact was made either, not sure if it was the glove or the head. They were always going back to the overhead view. If it was the head, you probably would have seen Dustin Wolf's head kind of like snap in a certain direction. But to call that high stick, I don't know. I thought it was very in line with the crossbar, but if they had reason to suggest that it was above it, great. I didn't see it. I thought that should have been interference. I thought that should have been the call. Yeah, I guess it was a ticky-tacky call on Huberdeau on the Farabee goal where it did kind of like nudge his blocker. It may not have impacted him in a big way, but the slightest movement could throw a goalie off. And I really do think that if Huska challenged that Domi one, which was way more egregious than the first two ones, then yeah, I get it was only 5-2 at the time. But then again, they scored right after that to make it 5-3.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that maybe if they did challenge it, maybe that could have been a boost where maybe they still could have got that goal. That could have carried over. That could have given them a little bit more momentum. Yeah, they were probably way out of it. Maybe like if you look, I don't know what the money puck, win-o-meter was at that time, but if it was at 20%, that easily could have shot up the right away to the other side right away and, given the team some life because that one call that could be reversed if it's a no goal. Okay, we still have a chance. We're still down by 2 at this point. Right. So I don't know. Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you. One should have been a different call. I would have challenged the other one in that. But yeah, crazy game all around, given how like there are multiple, goaltender interference, calls that should have been made that weren't made. So it's like I think James Duthie said it best on the broadcast. I don't know what goaltender interference is or like all these like
no one
these
does.
like replays have gotten to a point now where it's just like, man, that Matt Duchene one killed everything. And even for like offsides, goaltender interference, high sticks, it's now becoming way too invested in it. And it's now just like, you know what? Maybe we should have just let Matt Duchene keep that goal and it was onside kind of thing. Because who knows what would have happened. But at the point now you want to get the right call. But I think it's now like the most minuscule things, like a millimeter off, like for an offside, an egregious goaltender interference, even though it is. If it isn't, who knows? It's just gotten to a point where it's like, whatever, just make a decision already.
Well, you go from obviously goals called back to, I mean, off the top of this season, Kyle, like Calgary was, I would say, overperforming based on what the expectations were coming into the season. You had no Markstrom. Obviously, you made some moves up front. It just wasn't the same team that you had last season, and yet they still came out hot. They still came out. They were top 3 in the division for quite some time. Now, one of the stats that stood out for me last night was no Calgary Flame that has 100 face-offs taken has above a 50% face-off rate. Mm-hmm. They go out, they make this trade, they bring in Farabee, they bring in Frost. What are your thoughts on the trade? What are your thoughts on the Calgary Flames to this point in the season, knowing that that Pacific has kind of changed a little bit in the last month or so?
Well, to bring up like the face-off percentage, they brought Frost in. That was one of the bigger reasons why they wanted him in. And on Sunday when they played Seattle, he had a 60% face-off percentage after the game, right? So that immediately helps, right? And the whole thing with Conroy was that, for a lot of us, we had the same mindset where, okay, it's not going to be the greatest year in the world. And all of a sudden, this 3-year plan that he's kind of had for this team, it's advanced very fast, right? And all he's doing really is he's rewarding the team with how well that they've been playing, rewarding them by also not giving up a lot, right? And that was the main thing. Like we can look back, and if you guys ever want to look at it back in the recent draft class, a lot of those guys are playing really well, right? A lot of those guys, I happen to watch in the OHL, right, with where it goes from Perec. I don't know if you guys saw the one at the OHL deadline with Henry Muse going to Sudbury.
Yeah.
Managed to go see him in a game. He's a fast kid. He's super fast. So, like, really, he's a player I'm keeping my eye on, and I'm happy I'm able to kind of watch him too. But, like, outside of that, he didn't give away a lot of assets in order to acquire those two players. And I think they mentioned it on Barn Burner. I kind of listened to a little bit on the side where they were mentioning that he didn't give up a lot, and Craig Conroy basically had the patience to wait this long because it came around the time where Kuzmenko had a good couple of games, Peltier had a good couple of games, and apparently that was just enough to convince Daniel Briere that, you know, we're going to do the switch here, and you only really lose a second-round pick in which they have another second rounder already. So, it's a masterclass move. You're not giving up a lot. You do have a little bit of control when it comes to Morgan Frost this offseason as an RFA. And, you know, taking on Farabee for the next 5 years, it's going to take him time to get some footing in. But I think, like, even despite watching last night's game, I thought Farabee was playing very well. I thought he's working pretty well on that line with Huberdeau and Kadri. And, you know, there's going to be a little bit more shuffling, but I think so far it's working out for him.
There's been a lot of speculation, too, around Nazem Kadri this year and whether the team looks to move him and move his contract. What are your thoughts on moving Kadri at this point, knowing that you're sitting in the second wild card spot?
So they brought it up. Friedman brought it up last Saturday at intermission where he mentioned that Anderson, Kadri, and Weegar are no-goes at the deadline, right? We all kind of speculated that Anderson might be signing long-term, and then you bring up Kadri. If anything were to happen, it's going to be in the offseason. But at some point, it bothers me because I saw it all with Flames fans reacting last night. Like, you got to trade Anderson now, right? You know, Kadri's terrible at the face-off draw. You got to trade him, all this stuff, right? At what point, after all these moves that happened, right, do you like these guys committed to staying long-term? At what point do you have to commit to that and build around younger guys coming in to try and build something that's seemingly working out fairly well so far on a team that wasn't supposed to be doing well? So it's unfortunate because it all really started back when the Tkachuk and Gaudreau offseason happened, right? When they didn't want to return. And then it comes out that Zadorov's gone and Lindholm, and we all know how that went down. So it's more of an offseason thing. I'm sure they'll talk, but they've said it multiple times. And Kadri said it at the beginning of the year, I signed here for 7 years for a reason, to think that we are a good club. He loves the culture. He loves being there, right? And there's no reason to move him. And I don't see a reason to move him, right? So to get rid of him and to try to get all these assets, at what point do you stop trying to get assets and start building around the fact that you have some really good young guys coming up and you start building something around them for the future?
And just to further elaborate on that, you know, if you were to move on from Weegar, Anderson, Kadri, you're basically going to full-on rebuild right there. And Conroy, basically with where his team is at right now, I don't think you're in a position to fully rebuild. You know, you got some good pieces in place. You have a legitimate starter in Dustin Wolf right now who's been winning you games and could win the Calder Trophy right now.
Yeah.
You got two exceptional defenders on the back end. You got some pieces up front. You got Zane Parekh coming up through the system as well. So you're not – it just seems counterintuitive. Yeah, I get you want to move on from those big contracts. But when those big contracts come up, you are going to be looking at Dustin Wolf getting an extension. Anderson is definitely going to – I know teams have called Anderson the last few seasons. I've been one of those people that wanted to acquire Rasmus Anderson because he's the type of defender – that the Maple Leafs need to have on their blue line. You want to keep those players in the fold because when are you going to find a player like Rasmus Anderson again? Where are you going to find a two-way stalwart in Weegar? Kadri, I get the faceoffs is a bit of an issue, but he's producing right now. You got good depth in the bottom six. You have pieces in place. It just doesn't seem right to move on from them. And I know that, we talked about this last week, Andrew, about 10 forwards that the Athletic are looking at for the Maple Leafs, and Kadri was one of them. You're really going to try and trade for $7 million on the cap when the Maple Leafs are already strapped for this year. I know the cap's going up in the future, but for this season alone, you're going to need the team to retain salary. It just doesn't seem quite right where a Toronto Kadri reunion is not at this point right now.
Yeah.
So to me, it just seems like trading one of those three players that are now untouchable just doesn't make sense.
You can probably put to bed the fact that Anderson is staying. Like he's not. So there's already Conroy's basically has come out publicly and said, "Yeah, we're working on an extension with him." Like
so
that's
most likely
that's
off season.
Yeah, it's a foregone conclusion there. It'll really vary next year. I think if you bring up Kadri, that maybe that comes back into conversation, but it'll come up every year. But
because of the cap going up, I think that's the only reason why.
The cap's going up, and I mean, if anything, it's still it's a little bit favorable for a team that's still tied to the Huberdeau contract. Who, he's got 20 goals on the year as well, right? And then quickly too, you mentioned the salary cap with the young guys that we have to sign, right? Wolf's going to get signed long-term. Zari's going to get signed long-term. Coronado, who's been sensational this year.
I forgot about Coronado, too, who looks fantastic.
Yeah, and I thought he had a good game last night, too. So lock those guys down long-term. And the biggest thing, and I'll throw it back to you guys, is this. How many times have we seen a goaltender in the NHL take a team all the way to the Cup final and win?
Very few.
Right. But
especially as a rookie, too.
Sure, as a rookie. But it's happened. Right, where we've seen good goaltenders on a fairly decently average team all around make it all the way and go on a legit run. Because sometimes, like, how many times do we say it every year in the playoffs where a goalie can just steal you a series? He might not necessarily he might burn out, right? But he could steal you a series, right? And that's kind of the excitement that I think what they're looking at, and I'll throw it back to you guys, is they see what's happening with Wolf this year as as I think the leading Calder candidate. That's who they're building around.
I kind of hate that you brought that up right now because I'm not trying to compare.
No, you're good.
I'm not trying to compare Dustin Wolf to Carey Price, but I'm bringing back 2021 in that bubble where Carey Price literally carried that Montreal team on his shoulders to the Cup final against Tampa
Bay.
Bay.
It wasn't a great team.
It was not a great team at all.
Right?
They got there because of Price, big time.
Yeah. And it just ran out, right? Now, bad example because we saw what happened last night, and we'll get into it.
Growing pains though for a rookie goalie though.
Yeah, I know, but also too, like, and maybe we dive into the game here. I refuse to believe that this was Dustin Wolf's fault last night.
I mean, you look at the game last night, as the first three goals were all special teams power play goals. There was a lot of penalties being called. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Kyle. I think obviously it was a rough game for Dustin Wolf, but you also had a guy in William Nylander who went out and placed three very good shots. You had John Tavares who had a Matt Sundin-like backhand top cheese, and then you had Bobby McMahon coming down the wing who perfectly placed a shot. I don't think the only goal I think he would want back is the one that could have very likely been challenged for goaltender interference.
Exactly.
Where, Matthew Nye slides into the net. So I agree with you. I do think you mentioned Coronado last night. I think he had an incredible game. I was watching him on the power play, just, two steps back and forth, and he was open every single time. And I'm even as a Leaf fan, I'm sitting there saying, pass this guy the puck. He's got a wide open net.
Got a wicked wrister.
He's got an incredible shot, and they just weren't getting it to him. But yeah, I think last night was a good example of even teams that have a solid opportunity to win have bad games, and I think as a unit they had a bad game last night. That's personally what I saw from the Calgary Flames.
The only thing I'll say, and then we'll get to the Leafs side of it, but there's two things that really happened, right? And specifically, it's the second period because they were in this first and third period, right? Mm-hmm. It was the fact that two early power plays there in the second period. You never want to gift it to you guys because they're 9 times out of 10 going to capitalize it. That's just how good they are, right? Even with Marner out of the lineup, I mean, as a Flames fan watching these guys, it's like, well, crap, here we go, right? We have Joel Hanley out there on our top line, so that's really something to look forward to. So you gave them the power plays, and credit to the Leafs, like they go 2 for 2 on those two early on there. But it was miscommunication, it was missed assignments, it was not structurally operating there defensively, and the fact that they gave the puck over on so many silly turnovers that how many times did we see in the second period where it was 3-on-1, 3-on-1, 2-on-1, and all of them led to goals, right? So that's why I kind of say, like, I don't put that on Wolf. It was a bad night defensively, and especially in that second period, Huska mentioned after the game, he goes, I don't know who that team was in the second period, but that's just not who we are. And that stuff happens, right? And I guarantee you that they went into that locker room afterwards, because we'll meet again in March, right? And they'll go, yeah, we're going to bookmark this one because we were in this. And for whatever reason, you can put whatever missed words in front. That's who they were last night in the second period. The Leafs won that game, but I feel like the Flames lost it more than they won it.
Yeah.
I think you're being a little bit generous there when you said 9 times out of 10 the Maple Leafs are scoring the power play, considering how
I haven't watched the power play
inconsistent the power
much,
play has been this year. Yeah, but to your credit, that has been the finest the power play has looked. Even I think in the first period when they had that opportunity, I don't think they had a power play in the first, or did they? I can't remember, but if they did, I really thought that this was as good as the power play has looked in terms of movement, in terms of quickness, in terms of, playing all sides, going high, going low, and especially on that, especially on the Nylander goal, especially on the Tavares goal as well, everything worked out perfectly and executed properly on the power play. And I think on the flip side of things, I think the Maple Leafs penalty kill helped them out. It's just that the 5-on-3s didn't do them any favor, and they happened early on, which led to the goals against. If they were like penalties that happened 20 seconds remaining in the first, I think you could get a little bit more leeway or you won't be as tired. But because it happened early on, they did for the most part try to keep them to the outside. It's just, Uyghur had an absolute bomb from the point. And again, Coronado, his shot was absolutely fantastic. You can't fault the defenders, but I am going to fault, the players for taking costly penalties because, I didn't like the Benoit cross-check up on Kadri. I didn't like some of those calls that led to the 5-on-3s. They need to be more smart about their stick management. Otherwise, those infractions are going to kill you later on, especially in the postseason. So I agree. Calgary, I think the first was kind of even out. Toronto had their momentum in the first 10, 15. Calgary battled their way back. Second period, it was all Toronto, and I think Calgary still managed to push back, but I think Toronto didn't fully take their foot off the gas in that third period, kind of like they did against the Oilers, which was a good sign that they kind of learned their lesson from that game. So those are my big takeaways from that one from the Leafs side. But yeah, to your credit, the Flames just looked very off defensively. And even like watching highlights of games in the past, they're a team that you shouldn't take lightly because they can pounce on opportunities. And if the Maple Leafs didn't get their act together after those 5-on-3s, those goals could have played a big difference maker in a close game or a Calgary win.
Yeah. Anytime we're going to play you guys going forward too, the only way this team is going to win against the Leafs is if it's low scoring. That's just it. Yeah. Because Ryan Huska is basically, and he told them at the beginning of the year that, we have to do things a certain way in order for our team to win games this year. And we even said at the beginning of the year that it's going to be low goals because you don't have any, bona fide goal scorers on this team. They got to come from everybody, right? And you run lines 1 through 4, however you see it. And that's the only way you're going to win against a high octane offense against the Leafs. You need to find a way to shut them down and stick to your identity. And they just didn't do that last night.
I was going to say, you guys both commented on the Leafs power play. I mean, the reason the power play looked so good last night was they were getting those high danger opportunities between the hash marks, and the Leafs
were pushing them.
Yes, yeah, they haven't had that all season long. It was a couple defensive breakdowns on those power plays, and that's what led to those higher danger opportunities. That's the only reason that the Leafs power play looked decent, because all season long that hasn't been the case. And this was just they capitalized on a couple opportunities where they saw openings, and it just happened to be the right players with Tavares and Nylander, and it played out the way it did. But I wanted to kind of this is going to kind of jump into the previous game a little bit here, where the Leafs were in Edmonton, but Nylander obviously scores a hat trick. Now just 3 goals back of Leon Draisaitl for the league lead, which is crazy to think about. And he's also only 7 goals back of his career high. Obviously you're not one that sits there and watches the Leafs all the time, but in last night's game, seeing William Nylander, like what did you see from a guy like that? Like for the Leafs to have this bona fide goal scorer when Matthews hasn't been himself this season and Marner obviously out of the lineup last night.
Oh, you Peter, go ahead.
Oh, I thought he was directed over.
Sorry.
Oh, well,
okay, yeah. So fair enough.
If you want, I could answer first
Sure,
on that, but
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because before Nylander signed his contract, he was kind of always a scapegoat. When is he going to show up? Is he going to be very consistent or whatever? And then he has all those seasons where, leading up to the contract, he has those back-to-back 80-point seasons, almost hits 100 last year. And I think last year is when he absolutely popped off, and he's basically joined that conversation as one of those most important players for the Maple Leafs right now. And yeah, given how the season has gone with this team where, you have a new coach, you have a new system in place, you want to know how much of the offense is going to be impacted in terms of the star players this time around. Well, Marner's an absolute assist machine right now. And Nylander, despite not having as many assists, those 33 goals have come at an important point right now when you're only getting offense from basically 4 or 5 different players on your roster right now. Because if you're to look at the fact that he's got 33, Tavares is 21, Matthews 20 despite an injury season, Nyes hit 20, Marner 16, and Bobby McMahon got his 16th. Aside from those 6 guys, who else is going to carry the load? You're not getting that from the bottom 6, and I've written many pieces about how you need to get more depth from the bottom 6 to alleviate that pressure off from the top 6, but Nylander thrives in big situations. We saw it right now in those big moments. We've seen it time and time again in the playoffs. We've seen it time and time again during the regular season as well. He's going to be one of those key players where, he should be in that conversation where he could be one of the top wingers in the NHL right now. Obviously, all the attention is going to be on Draisaitl. It's going to be on other players like Mitch Marner because he's so versatile in the way that he plays every aspect of the game. But you got to throw him into the conversation as well because of how dangerous he could be at 5-on-5 on the power play, because he's absolutely lethal right now. And to take some of that pressure off Matthews right now, and now he's leading the team in goals, it's a good change of pace because we know how good Matthews is, but to see Nylander take charge and be that go-to offensive contributor offensively with the goals, I think it's a good sign for him. So, that's my take in all of this. And the fact that he's closing in on Draisaitl, again, it's one of those things that you got to have that conversation with. And again, I'm not trying to put him in the same stratosphere as Draisaitl, but put some respect on his name right now, kind of thing.
You mentioned that. I'll piggyback off that. I like Nylander's contract more than I like Draisaitl's.
Yeah,
right. Mind you, the cap going up helps, right, in the next year or two, right? So that's going to help. But in terms of just still, you can still even better with the cap going up. If you're still going to be competitive in the next 2 to 3 years, let's just say as an example, you can still find ways to build around it and get a little bit more goal, get a little bit more help on your secondary, on your third line, and all that fun stuff. So I mean, he's always been playing well, and he's probably the one guy you can look back on come playoff time where he's shown up, right? And kind of in watching the little documentary at the beginning of the year where you could tell like he was just itching and scratching to get on the ice against Boston, right? And like that's going to be a big piece come playoff time, right? And you need him to be up there and perform, and you want Marner to be healthy and all that, and that's always going to be my thing with the Leafs is, come playoff time, like we've all said it, it's, this is all exhibition games at this point for you guys, right? Like we've talked about it before.
This is our preseason.
It's all preseason for you guys because you know what you're going to get in, right? And that's the whole thing. You got to get in the dance and you got to be ready for it, right? And, you look at all these other teams all of a sudden, and I'm so curious what they'll do with the deadline too, right? Because you've seen ever since Rantanen got dealt, anything's on the table at this point, right? There's a lot of things out there that are on the table. So that certainly was the first domino. And I'm very curious to see how they'll be able to utilize and go maybe try to get a little bit more depth to get ready for a run.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Yeah. It's going to be the conversation piece for the next five, 6 weeks. Yeah,
yeah.
On what the Leafs are going to do leading into the deadline. They always seem to make a big move, and I think Brad Treliving doesn't really have like any commitment to any of the older players. I think his commitments are to the Matthew Nyes, the guys that he helped kind of bring into the organization as well. But before we let you go there, Kyle, just one quick question about Edmonton. One quick question about Ovechkin. I'll ask you that one last before we let you go. But obviously the Leafs were in Edmonton a couple nights back. They got the job done there. Does this make them a competitive team in that they can stay on par with the Edmonton Oilers, who are, let's be real, favorites to make it back to the Cup out of the West this year?
Yeah, I think just looking at it, it's going to become between whoever's going to make in the conference final. I think it's going to come down to Vegas and Edmonton, right? I think that feels like a collision course. I think LA's trailed off. Whoever gets that number 1 seed, I don't think they should have a problem with either wildcard teams, whether it be Colorado, Vancouver, or Calgary. There really shouldn't be an issue there. So I think that feels like it's on a collision course. And again, since that domino fell with Rantanen, now, for the Oilers, they've had the taste of being all the way to Game 7. You've had the taste for the Golden Knights, who've made it to the Cup final, and they know what it's going to take, and they know what they need, right? And, I don't think with the addition of John Klingberg, getting installed in the lineup is going to be the last piece of the puzzle. They're certainly going to be very active come deadline time because, I think that it's going to tell a lot that who really wants to push ahead here in the West, because Rantanen's now gone, right? And the Jets are doing well. I think it really is going to come down to who's going to make that really big move at the deadline to announce to the world that we're the ones to take seriously in the West.
Speaking of potential big move happening, Kevin Weeks just reported, speaking to sources, about Dylan
Another
Cousins,
photo?
About Dylan Cousins.
Oh, God, no.
Montreal Canadiens, Detroit Red Wings, the Calgary Flames, which it has been a little bit rumored now, but now the Toronto Maple Leafs are in the mix for Cousins.
Interesting.
So here's the thing.
Which before, it seems like Detroit or Buffalo wasn't keen on moving him, or there should be no interest on Cousins. Now there's interest on Cousins.
So what is that? So, okay, let me ask you guys this, though, about that. You mentioned... Well, hear me out. You have Calgary, you have Toronto, you have Detroit, Montreal, right? Outside of Calgary, what do all those teams have in common with Buffalo?
In the Atlantic.
Bingo. And we talked about it on one of our pods where we said, why in God's green earth would Buffalo want to trade Dylan
with
Cousins?
Division rival.
They don't. Unless they know
that something else going on.
Unless they know they can look at this offer and go, yeah, we're going to make them look stupid in the newspaper the next day.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only reason. Other than that, they don't need to do that. And frankly, I don't think they should. Right. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the best thing to do is, I'm not saying ship him to Calgary, but ship him out west, somewhere where you don't see him, like they did with Jack Eichel and so on and so forth. And then you see what happens. I don't think that we can give a good enough package to Buffalo. I think there's pieces there, but I don't think Craig Conroy wants to mess around with the future still.
If you feel like you don't have a big enough package to get Cousins, I feel like the Maple Leafs may be out of that running unless they have a big name player to move on, like a Fraser Minton, or I don't know if Ethan Cowan will be enough. Sorry, Andrew, I know you got his jersey.
Yeah.
But like, if you're willing to move a top prospect, a first, and possibly a roster player like Nick Robertson, who's been on the rumors of being like needing a change of scenery, I mean, is that the best that you could do to try and win the sweepstakes? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'll say this. I'll ask you this, Andrew, actually. Do you think it's going to cost more for whoever acquires Cousins than what Vancouver did with JT Miller?
I think it should be the same price. Or
I think it'll cost a little bit more because you look at the age and you look at the upside on Dylan Cousins. But I'm going to double down on the rumor mill here and say, if you're willing to trade him within the division, which seems to be the speculation, then that outside of one of those teams blowing you out of the water, that tells me that they have something on Dylan Cousins that maybe teams don't know about.
Maybe.
I mean, this is a guy who skated literally skated off the ice after a goal on his team. That, you know, there's been so much turmoil in Buffalo this season. You know, we saw what the Tage Thompson hit the other night. Nobody came to his defense. It does make you wonder why they'd be willing, a team in Buffalo's situation right now, young, still trying to build, still trying to get to that next level, still trying to get to the playoffs, why you would move on from a guy like Dylan Cousins.
Yeah.
That's
a fair question.
It should be the bigger question, right? Like, why are you willing to move on from a guy like that when he's supposed to be one of the centerpieces of your growth and development?
Lindy Ruff certainly doesn't help with that equation.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So then you wonder why Lindy Ruff is the guy that's behind the bench.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. Last question before we let you go here. Alex Ovechkin scored another empty netter last night. He's now within 17 of breaking Gretzky's record. I took a futures out on DraftKings, one of our fine sponsors over at the Hockey Podcast Network, that he would break Gretzky's record this season. I took that future out right before he got injured, the night before he got injured and broke his leg. So I was like, there's wasted money.
Damn it.
But
maybe not. Maybe not.
He has come back and he's done fairly well. There's still time left in the season. 17 goals doesn't seem like a lot for a guy who can literally put up a 2-3 goal performance on any given night. What are your thoughts on Ovechkin breaking Gretzky's record this season?
Depends how many times they put him on the ice for an empty netter, right? Like that. Every time I feel like I've seen them get an empty netter, it comes from Ovechkin, right? They know it too, right? So what? They have 30 games left, give or take. It's doable. It's going to be difficult. I think it's. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he gets to like 3 or 4 goals and then the season ends. That feels like the direction it could go in, but. All it takes, he did it earlier in the year where I think he had a hat trick earlier on this year. You go up against a bottom feeder team and you just feed them like crazy, then I think you can definitely cut the deficit. So it's a mixture of that and, the amount of times that they have an empty net and the amount of times they know they're just giving it to him, right? Every single time it feels like he's getting it. So it's doable, but if I had to put money on it myself, I'd probably say for next season. I think it's still an uphill battle.
There you go. Well, Kyle, I appreciate you coming on today and enjoy the slopes out west. Have a good time and enjoy the beers. Let them flow, and we'll touch base with you once you're back and well rested.
Sounds good, guys. Take it easy, and we'll chat soon, hopefully.
All right, buddy.
Take care,
Thank
man.
you.
Bye, guys.
See you later. All right, get us back to the duo here. But anyways, since we're on the subject, just a quick word from our fine sponsors over at DraftKings Sportsbook. This ain't the little itty bitty teeny tiny bowl. This is the Super Bowl. This is Super Bowl. This is Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action. It is Super Bowl weekend. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. All right, well, let's close out with a little bit of Leaf talk here before we shut her down. Obviously, the Mitch Marner injury we kind of touched on a little bit. Lower body injury. He's not expected to miss the Four Nations Cup. Peter, injuries, injuries, injuries. We've been talking about it all season long with every single player on the Leafs lineup. It seems. What are your thoughts on this latest bump in the road for the Maple Leafs?
Yeah, so like you can't escape the injury bug right now. Yeah, you dealt with Matthews, you dealt with Tavares, you dealt with Stolars, Wall to start the season, and now Marner. So, I mean, doesn't seem like it is major, which is a really good sign. It's just, I mean, at one point, again, kind of like the Alex Pietrangelo thing, where if you're dealing with something and you're not up to playing in the tournament, how many players are going to start backing out? I mean, we saw Sidney Crosby take a big collision yesterday, and now his status is up in the air where they don't have enough information on him. He did come back, but now it seems like Mike Sullivan doesn't have enough info to give an update. Quinn Hughes is battling something right now, so it seems like, is this all going to be worth it for this tournament when you do have the Stanley Cup playoffs to think about later on if you are dealing with something, Again, if it doesn't seem like it'll impact him during the tournament, great. But you do have to think about what's beyond there. And we know what Toronto is like when it comes to Mitch Marner and playoff hockey. If he doesn't have standout performance, everyone's going to be like, well, is he still battling something? He should have taken the time off the Four Nations to recover for the playoffs because he was playing very well and all that. You're going to have all these narratives and storylines where it's like there's no winning if you're going to be Mitch Marner right now.
If you go to
like,
no,
sorry, I don't know where I was going with my next thought, but like, it just seems like, there's you can't escape it basically.
Yeah, if you go to the Four Nations Cup and you come back and you don't perform come playoff time, you just kiss the entire season that you had, which is going to be a career year.
And potential contract
right out the window.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to be a thought in the back of his head. So I wonder if it's like a small tweak and he's just, playing it safe. Well, I want to play in the Four Nations Cup. I want to play with Crosby. I want to play with McKinnon. I want to play with McCarr.
Yeah.
I want to play with all those guys. So I'm going to sit out a game in the regular season, which I know my team should be able to win, and make sure I'm 100% going into the Four Nations Cup so that I can come back and still have the career year and still get the contract and still perform come playoff time. It seems like it wasn't anything big, like you mentioned, because, Berube came out and said, yeah, I'm not really sure what happened. It happened in the Edmonton game. We'll see how it plays out, but it's just a lower body injury. But, I guess this is, like you guys said with Kyle there, I guess this is like a preseason game for the Leafs, knowing that they're going to make the playoffs. So you might as well sit out. I don't know. But you're to me, you're chasing down the league lead in points.
Yeah, because you know who you're going to have to go after when it's all said and done.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's an interesting thing. Obviously, it's not nothing serious. They haven't ruled them out for Four Nations, so we'll see where that goes. Before we jump in our next point here, just a quick comment over on the YouTube channel. So thank you for joining us today, Colin. Colin Rothwell says he will get in the playoffs. It will be a series-winning goal by Ovi. So just to clarify, we're talking regular season goals. Gretzky did have 894 in the regular season. Ovi is sitting 17 back of breaking that record in the regular season. Gretzky had another 122 playoff goals on top of his 894. So, unfortunately, even if he gets the goals in the playoffs, which I'm sure he will, it won't affect it won't affect my bet, first of all, but it won't affect the record either. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure he'll make an impact at come playoff time as well. Colin, thank you again for joining in. Thank you for your comment.
Imagine if they were counting playoff goals as well, because Ovi only has 39 playoff goals throughout his career.
Yeah.
That would still put him way off the mark if you were counting both of them.
Well, I mean, you'd say Gretzky's the greatest goal scorer of all time then still, right? But I would argue that Mike Bossy is still the greatest goal scorer of all time. He just, his career was cut short. He had the best goal per game average.
Sorry, I may be reading this wrong. Maybe he has 72.
Let's see.
playoff goals.
Let's quick.
I'm looking at Hockey Reference. I don't know I don't think they're doing this properly, but
Alex Ovechkin come playoff time. So he's got 878 in the regular season.
yes.
Come playoff time, he's got 72 goals.
Okay, I was looking at the wrong section. Okay, yeah. Okay.
So he'd be right, honestly, like he's only
He
50
could-
back of Gretzky too in the playoffs.
There you go.
So interesting note as well. I don't know how many more playoffs. He's not scoring 50 this playoff time or this playoff round.
Would be fun.
It'd be crazy if he lit up the playoffs for 50 goals. You'd have to think Washington would go on to win the cup if he scored 50 in the playoffs. But and at 39, who knows how many more playoffs he has ahead of him. So maybe not a breakable record there for him. But anyways, we talked about Marner. We talked about Nylander's 33 goals. Stolarz is on the verge of coming back. There was speculation that he could have started last night in Calgary. Obviously, he didn't even back up. They had Matt Murray on the bench. But this guy is coming back right around the corner. We're back to having the duo that we started the season with. What are your thoughts on Stolarz when he comes back? Are we going right back to the 1-2? Or are we giving Stolarz the reins? Or are we sticking with Wall for a little while with how he's performed recently?
Yeah, this is really tough because, see, here's the thing. With the break coming up, I'm pretty sure that they would love to get Stolarz in for a game or two, but I wonder if maybe they just hold him off until after the break. So that way, when he comes in, maybe he can get the first game back or so, or first two to try and get your feet wet. But he's already been out long enough. He's already been practicing. Why not give him a game or two? That way, if I'm not actually, I had a thought in my head. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to jinx myself. But yeah, they said that he was probably healthy enough to start that game against Calgary, which would have been great. But at the same time, you want to be cautious with him because he is a little bit older. Again, kind of like Wall, not a whole lot of experience, but we saw how well Stolarz played when Wall was injured and how well Wall is playing when Stolarz is injured. So you have to think that when they're both healthy, you got to go back to that stretch where maybe it's like 1, 2, 3 game Stolarz, and maybe you try to balance that out with maybe 1, 2 Wall, where you get that balance in, where Wall gets back-to-backs every other night kind of thing. We'll see what happens because, yeah, it's a very interesting situation because of their history as starters. But they're playing so well that why not? That if they want to be starters, you got to give them that extra leash. If Joseph Wall is going to be your guy in the future, he's got to be able to play at least 40, 50, 60 games. Same with Stolarz. If he wants to be a starter right now, he's got to play 40, 50, 60 games. So, I mean, I think you have to go back to what they had before because it was working. And the fact that you had to rely on one goalie for a stretch at the start of the season and one goalie during the mid-part second half of the season right now shows that you're confident enough that you could roll with either guys come playoff time. But I think you want to come down to one player or one goalie to man the crease. But right now for the regular season, if you want to split the duties again, I think that'll be the best thing for them.
Well, I mean, yeah, you really haven't had the two of them healthy at the same time for an extended period of time this season, right? So it'll be interesting to see the way that they go. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think right now they need to keep Stolarz out until after the break. Over the next couple games, they've got 2 winnable games against against the Seattle Kraken, and then obviously the Vancouver Canucks to finish off their West Coast swing here as well. Yeah, I don't know. We talked about the West Coast swing here a little bit. We talked about Edmonton. The Leafs got it done there. We talked about Calgary with Kyle there. Before we close it out here, I want to get your opinion. Right now, the Leafs sit second in the Atlantic Division, 1 point off of the Florida Panthers, 2 games in hand. But if the playoffs were to start today, the Leafs would be taking on the Ottawa Senators in a Battle of Ontario. We haven't had that since the early 2000s. Ottawa hasn't been the team to be in the playoffs since the early 2000s. Now they're sitting just 4 points back, and obviously the Leafs have a game in hand there as well. But if we see a Battle of Ontario, I mean, this is the first time in a long time that I would feel, I don't know, I'd feel a little uncomfortable going into the playoff series because Ottawa's a frightening team this year. And
they've had the Maple Leafs number 2.
Yeah, they've had the Leafs number and Linus Allmark in net.
Shabbat's playing well, Sanderson's playing well, Kachuk's playing well, Stützle is playing well. This is a tough team come playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think we would all love a Battle of Ontario because that was a thing like in the early thousands. That was the
Takes me back to the
absolutely
Sundin, the Thomas, the
Alfredson. Yeah, Hasek.
Heatley. You had Spets on the Ottawa side. It was crazy.
It was fun. But right now, if Toronto were to go up against Ottawa, you could rest assured that Ottawa is ready for that opportunity right now. I mean, you saw what happened during that home game where the Maple Leafs basically go in and then claim that as their home arena, and you barely hear any Sens fans. And when the Ottawa Senators score, what's going to happen there? They're definitely going to thrive on that, where maybe they don't like the fact that Maple Leafs fans travel well, especially 5-6 hours a little bit further up out northeast or whatever. It's going to be an interesting matchup. But then again, there's no guarantee for Ottawa just yet because of how close everything is. Detroit is 1 point behind them, Tampa Bay 2, and they have another game against Tampa Bay coming up very soon. Boston's 2 points behind them. Columbus, if they get to a wild card spot, Columbus will be 3 points, or they're 3 points behind them right now. So it's going to be an interesting battle to what's going to happen in those wild card / third spot in the East, because you don't know what to expect. But any team that'll be in that third spot, they're going to deserve that spot coming in, and it's not going to be an easy matchup because this is what the playoffs are, and the Maple Leafs should not take their opponent lightly, even if it is Ottawa Senators, who possibly have exceeded expectations this season. But they're a damn good team to be in that spot right now.
Hey, Montreal's only 7 points back.
Mm-hmm.
Montreal is only 7 points back.
Yeah,
we talked about this in our preview shows. Like, the Atlantic is an interesting division this year because all of a sudden you don't have the Boston as the top team. You don't have the Tampa Bay as the top team. And Florida and Toronto seem to be those top two teams, but outside of that, you've got 4 teams that are going to be very close in hand. And right now they're eating up the two wild card spots as well. So it's going to be it's going to be a divisional opponent. I would guess it's going to be a divisional opponent. It'll be fun to watch. If it is Ottawa, do up your seatbelt, get ready. You're going to be in for a ride. But yeah, it's going to be a fun time over the next 30 games. See what happens and see what happens come playoff time. But outside of that, Peter, I got nothing else. I think we're good to close it up here for episode 188.
Mm-hmm.
Big shout out to Kyle for jumping on with us, especially a day out from heading out west to hit the slopes and crush a few beers. I will say I am 23 days without a drop of booze. It's been feeling good, man. It's been feeling good. It's a good
change of pace every now and then,
It is. The joints are feeling better. I'm not feeling 50 anymore. I'm still feeling my late 30s, which makes sense. But it's been a good ride, and it's tough not to grab one when those Leafs are getting the goals called back though early on in the game. So. Anyways, it's been a fun week. Obviously, trades are flowing right now across sports. The Jays signed Scherzer. Luka Doncic is a Los Angeles Laker.
Man, have you seen the clips of the Mavericks fans like putting up eulogies outside?
They carried a casket.
Yeah,
outside of the stadium.
Man, and now the Mavericks are going to their season ticket holders and offering refunds.
Yeah,
you screwed up big time when one, you called to say, "Hey, do you want our star, player on our team?" And 2, the fallout that you have to deal with right now.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
It's
not
insane.
pretty in Dallas right now.
Yeah.
But so trades are flowing. JT Miller, Michael Granlund gone. So who knows what's happening next in the NHL? But we will stay tuned. We will continue to have a couple post game shows whenever I can get to it, and some quick shifts as well. Outside of that, Peter, it's been a hell of a week. Hopefully, I'll be 100% when I come back next week for episode 189. Until then, 2 more games, 4 Nations Cup. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see if Marner and Crosby are there for Team Canada. But until next week, episode 189. That's it for Peter and I today on Sticks in the Six.